Welcome on board to the Urban Canvas, exploring Shoreditch's vibrant street art tour. Come with me to see the best and brightest street art that London has to offer. Welcome on board, guys. My name is Nick. I am your lovely, handsome, gorgeous, charming, sexy... Madam, please calm down. We'll go for a drink afterwards. It's just the beard, you understand, mate, right? Exactly. But guys, of course you have come here today more than anything to talk about street art and graffiti, am I right?
Yes.
I said, am I right?
Yes.
Fantastic, guys. So, can anyone tell me what is the earliest form of street art and graffiti? Like, tell me about its origins.
The cave.
Spot on. We could say cavemen. You could go back to saying street art. You could go back to the cavemen. We could even go back this idea of painting on walls. You could even go to the Romans as well. We could say graffiti, ancient Egypt. There is so much of this. Now, street art's early beginnings start with a form of street art known as tagging. Tagging still exists today. It's a very underground movement, meaning if you're not in the movement, you have no idea what any of it means. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this. This then grows, guys, and then comes into the 60s and 70s in America, in the major cities, particularly New York, where artists would begin to use public spaces as their canvases. It then grows from the 80s, and in the 90s, it starts to become a more commercialized art form, with some of the biggest names all over the world getting involved in this. But not only has it entered the commercial sphere, it's also entered the political sphere as well. There are loads of different forms of this artwork to see, and we'll see it, because the one thing that makes street art really fun, guys, is there is no set medium to street art. It can be literally anything. So, for example, you've got the most three easy forms to look for. The first of which are murals. Murals are usually on walls, they're big canvases, usually having like a big political or cultural statement. They sometimes use the foliage and everything around them. Like this is a big mural behind us here, which I absolutely love. This is by a company called Global Street Art, who we're going to talk about later on today. I saw them do this, it's insane. So that's the first major form. You've got murals, you've got tagging and murals, and then you've got another which has a really fancy name, but is less fancy than it actually is. It's called wheat pasting. So it's basically just posters glued up onto walls as well. So there's so much of this, and there are so many different forms. With that in mind, guys, so street art, graffiti, and tagging. Would you say, let's look at tagging first. Would you say this is legal, illegal, or somewhere in between? Just pure tagging, pretty much illegal. How about murals and wheat paste? We'll put those two together, illegal, or somewhere in between. It kind of blurs the lines. And Shoreditch is probably, for me, one of the best places in the world for this, because it's become a mecca for street artists around the world. There is so much experimentation, so much work, and the community absolutely loves it around here, and we cherish it. But before we go into more of that, and street art and graffiti, I'll tell you a bit more about the history. I want to tell you a bit about this area. Now, Shoreditch's origins, where we're going to be going around today, originate all the way back to the Saxons here as well, when there used to be down the main road here a river, which they called Sewer Ditch, hence the name Shoreditch. Now, Shoreditch has also been Shoreditch, the East End, has been the immigrant hub of this city, and a very cultural one as well. For example, in 1576 here in Shoreditch was where the first ever permanent playhouse was in London. So there's been so much of this thanks to the immigrant communities that resided in here from the 14th and 15th centuries, when this area was predominantly occupied by a large French Huguenot community following the Edict of France. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Irish and Roman Catholic communities. The 18th and 19th century, predominantly the Jewish community, and in the 20th and 21st century, predominantly Indian, Bengali, Pakistani, Rajasthani, Sri Lankan, and Afro-Caribbean. And every community has left their mark on here, and we're going to see so much of this as we walk around today. I said, sound good?
Yeah.
So let's make our way through. So guys, if you'd like to follow me that way, let's make our way through. Okay, how you doing, darling? So guys, just come on round for me for a second. Now, over here is a great example. So would you call this one over here tagging or a mural? What would you define this as? It's obviously not a wheat paste, so don't worry.
Mural with tagging on top.
Yeah, so they kind of do blend into each other. The other fun thing about street art, but as a tour guide is a right pain in the rear, is something you're probably not surprised to hear. Most things don't last very long. So this means every time I do this tour, I can't have the luxury of just coming up half an hour before and relaxing. No, I have to come up 2 hours before and do a whole route just to see what's still there every time. So it's probably the most challenging tour I do. So guys, as I said, everything is hidden in plain sight today, right? So if you look up on the ledge, can you see the funky hipster pigeon up there? So I'll give you a close-up of another one that used to be round here. This is by a street artist who started in the early 90s, defines himself as a vandal extraordinaire. He calls himself Ronzo. You'll never find a photo of Ronzo, he keeps himself hidden. I got to meet him, I'm really excited about this. Ronzo loves to do these little moulds everywhere all over London. You're going to see a lot of them here today as well. Another thing to look at just up here. This is by an American artist from Philadelphia called Stephen Powers. Now, Stephen Powers was one of the key influencers in bringing the tagging world into the street art world. But rather than tagging his name everywhere, he leaves positive messages all over the place. He did this one here in 1996, which I always find ironically funny, being so sarcastically British, saying, let's adore and endure each other, ladies and gentlemen, as well. So really cool guys, if you'd like to follow me. Now, one thing, do you remember I said to you about most artwork doesn't last? Perfect example here. This amazing piece by Jamour Chames, obviously using a lot of cubism as well within his style. And if you like any artists today, if I don't mention them and you just happen to think they're really cool, one little tip for most artists, have a look out for they'll always want you to find them. They'll leave their tags, their Instagram, their Twitter handles like Jamour Chames as well, guys. Another guy that's really famous, this guy here with the H's, HELCH. HELCH goes everywhere. If anyone ever drives on the British motorways, you'll see him on all the bridges. I still don't know how the hell he gets up there. Do you remember I spoke to you about when we were at the start about a group called Global Street Art? So this was done by them. Global Street Art are a branding company. They started themselves up in 2012. And what they do is they work with some of the biggest brands in the country, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Citroen, Microsoft, Apple, and work with up and coming and established street artists so they can make these amazing murals rather than just ugly posters everywhere. Also, guys, just above it, you'll see these two train carts are actually nightclubs up there, one by The Real Deal and one by Sen Enigma. You'll see H for HELCH. Now, another thing I want you to look out at, guys, is this really ugly, grey, dull building over here. Makes perfect sense that I talk about this, right? Now, that is Cult Technologies. They are a telecommunications company. And they have two buildings. They have this one here, and they have one on the back of it, which used to be a grey, ugly, granite, dull building. And in 2017, the heads of the company went to their staff and said, what can we do to improve your day? And they said, well, can you do anything about our view? Because most of our windows face out that way rather than seeing all the cool stuff here. So here's what they did. They hired 16 of the best street artists in London to work in pairs in their other building, creating giant murals under the theme Connectivity Matters. Now, guys, over here is one of my favourite pieces by two amazing artists. The side with the robot here is by an artist called Captain Kris, K-R-I-S. Again, I will send you all these names later. You don't have to remember them. So, Captain Kris is looking at connectivity from the form of technology, the way we can intercommunicate with each other at vast distances and still have a full conversation. However, do we think that technology like this is a good thing? Has it brought us close together or has it brought us further apart, would we say? Some between the two, yeah. So you've kind of got that connectivity. On the other side of it, though, you've got the woman dancing around nature and the world around her. That is by a guy called Tizer, T-I-Z-E-R. So he's looking at human connectivity with the world around them as well, in cooperation. Next to them as well, you've got two amazing artists. The lower half here, unfortunately, I hate the fact that the van's blocked my path here. This is by Zadok, and the upper half is by a really amazing British artist called Ed Hicks. Now, they're looking at connectivity from a very different perspective. They're looking at it from what happens in nature, underground, you know, the root trees, the things we cannot see together. One thing I want to show you, just how incredible the detail is with these, and why I think this is really special, the cult building, is this. Looking at the two surfaces here, why would it be more simple for me to spray paint on here rather than here? The texture, exactly, the surface. Because what's going to happen every time I spray on there? It's just going to dribble. So you imagine, that's one thing I love to show you this, because you look at the detail. This meant Zadok would have had to have gone over this with different nozzles, different spray cans, different type of colouring, again and again and again and again. So they took them a couple of weeks. It took them a couple of weeks to get. So they would have done like a couple of weeks on one, a couple of weeks on the other side as well. And the fact they even did it in 2 weeks is pretty remarkable to me in itself. So, guys, if you come over here for a sec, over here's an amazing piece. This is by a group. Oh,
Not me.
well, you can be if you'd want to. It's by an amazing group called Nomad Clan. Nomad Clan is looking at it's a cool name, isn't it? It's looking at technology from the use of how we communicate today. So looking at the old form of letter writing, which I would say, you think how much more time you took over writing a letter. It was before computers were invented, I'm sorry to disappoint you. And obviously how much more detail and effort it would take for us to do it, if you remember as well. And looking at it as well through the way we send letters, so kind of using the kind of Christian theology of the dove, but instead of a dove having a pigeon as well, because obviously pigeon carriers. And also I like to think of that in terms of when we think of Royal Mail, how often we send things and what are the chances it actually arrives at the destination on time we asked it to be.
Never.
Exactly, there we go. Also next to it is by two remarkable artists. The ball called Future is by Lovepusher, so the future of technology, connectivity. And the woman is by an amazing guy who I would definitely recommend looking at called Mr. Cenz. In Bristol, I know he's got absolutely loads. You can always tell Mr. Cenz by the wavy lines of all that kind of psychedelic look as well. So guys, this is my friend Bill. Bill who? Shakespeare, exactly. Considered by many to be Britain's greatest ever playwright. Over 50 different plays and over 150 sonnets and poems, ladies and gentlemen. But why would Shakespeare have a statue here?
That's what I was wondering.
You know, why not the National Theatre or Leicester Square? Do you remember what I told you earlier about the first ever permanent playhouse in London? In 1576? Where was it? Right there. The Courtyard House. This is where it once stood, where Shakespeare and his team would originally perform many of his plays. He actually lived in the area, and there's also a plaque for where he lived near the London Wall. And it is said that many of his lower class characters are actually based off of people he met down here in Shoreditch. And that's why there's that amazing, beautiful mural there, the Romeo and Juliet one, for where it once stood, which I think is beautiful. Few things to show you while we're here, guys. Firstly, just one more from the cult building. Well, both of these actually. This one here by Autone Neist. Yeah. So they did this one as well in 2017 for Pride as well. So all the connecting, like the rainbow flag and all the connectivity of the wires interconnecting together, which I think is pretty cool. This one here is also the last I'm going to show you from the cult building. This is by Hunto, who's done the Picasso faces. You might have seen them when we first came around the corner. And Tizer, who did the dancing woman I showed you. Now, when he created this one in 2017, fun fact for you, all the actual people Tizer made, they are real people. They were the heads of each of the department when this was first made. Now guys, we've had a look at more like commercially, legally authorized things. I want to look at the more underground as well, because I always feel that's kind of mainly what you've come for street art wise, right? Good. Let's look at a couple of really cool ones you're going to spot today. So firstly, there's this guy over here. Now this is by an artist called Cartoonneros. He uses a form called stenciling. Does anyone know what stenciling is?
Like spraying over a stencil.
Yeah, like stencil plastic sheets, cut them out with a, what's the knife called? I can never think of its name. The tiny little knife, and then you do like one over another. It's really, really cool. He usually always does rock stars and hip hop stars. Now, can anyone tell me which rock star this is? Thank God for that. He smells a bit like Teen Spirit, that's why. This is Kurt Cobain. This is from the photo of his album In Utero, which this year celebrates its 30th anniversary, ladies and gentlemen. So you can see where Cartoonneros has gone over by this guy, Emory. You can even see the influence of I always call this bit, it makes me think of the British Museum, or as I like to call it, Thieves' Palace, for obvious reasons. See some other great people. I love this stencil here. Brexit monotony always makes me chuckle. The James Brown Get Up. My Dog's Size with the eye is absolutely beautiful, and Stump Dog has been used in so many advertisements, it's ridiculous. I know someone's slightly gone over this. Can you all see this black and white swan over here? Now this is by a local East End artist. He goes by his tag. You can just about see it through the pink. This is One's Art. He usually does black and white swans or flowers, the idea of bringing everything back to nature. He's one of my absolute favourites. Now, I couldn't believe I actually managed to get in touch with him. And I asked him, well, how do you get your stuff up? Do you go to the pub and ask them permission, or what do you do? And his response was, and I love saying this, but excuse my language, no, I put my stuff there and people happen to like my crap, so they let it stay. He's amazingly cool. He even prints his stuff on t-shirts, yet they always sell out in 5 minutes. I am desperate to get one. Also, guys, this pub here is really famous. If anyone's a rock and roll fan, Has anyone heard of the band or the artist, The War on Drugs? Yep. Everyone thinks really heavy. It's not. It's like really folky and chilled. This is where he played his first ever London gig in 2018. Old Blue Last. Over here is again one of the most prominent figures for street art in East London, a local boy. This is a guy called David Speed. He's one of the loveliest men I've ever met in my life. If we're lucky, we might bump into him today. David Speed started in the early 2000s while doing this in his spare time whilst training to be a primary school teacher. He always does figures of just regular people. They send him in photos, sometimes the stories based around charities, most recent ones are for people with neurological disease, and he donates all the proceeds towards them as well. And always in this pink, neon and blue lighting. He either does people or cats. Also, he's always walking around with his little schnauzer everywhere, so if we're lucky, we might bump into it. It's so cute, it's unbelievable. Look over here. This is by a remarkable artist, a guy called Ben Wilson. He started in the early 2000s, wanted to make people aware of the litter problem here in London. So he still to this day goes around painting pieces of chewing gum. And if you look really closely at that, so if you go into it, and now look at the road, and then look back down, it's the whole road painted into that one piece of chewing gum. I've seen him do it, literally a tiny paintbrush. There's another one, just over here. It's pretty remarkable. Before you ask, he doesn't go around with packs of chewing gum, he just finds them on the floor and then uses them. Now over here is another early British artist from the early 2000s. Now when he started, he was heavily influenced by Japanese culture and also another thing called dotting. You'll see where he gets it from later on. Dotting is basically where you get your spray can very close, you spray and then let it dribble to create this sort of effect. Now, he started off in the early 2000s and his name is actually Dan Kitchener. Dan Kitchener, though, like a lot of them, doesn't want people to know who he is originally. So Dan Kitchener came up with a really clever name so that no one could figure out who he was. Rather than Dan Kitchener, he became Dank. Very creative, I'm sure you'd agree. Also behind you guys, probably the most, one of, if not the most, apart from Banksy, most famous street artist in the world, a guy called Thierry Noir. Thierry Noir is Parisian and he is most famous for being the first person to do street art on the Berlin Wall following its collapse. One of his pieces sold at an art gallery just off the back of Park Lane a few months ago, actually, for £500,000 on a tiny one. It's insane. So Kai, K-A-I, his name, right there in the corner. Yeah, I love the McDonald's fries. I think they're awesome. I also love the Coca-Cola bottle. It just makes me chuckle. And the MasterCard. So yeah, Kai is absolutely awesome. He's even like, when I tried to find photos of him, it's his body, but he's got a full mask of the Kai face and put it on top of him. Stik is famous because why is he called Stik?
Who's a stick man?
Yeah, he does stick men. He makes sure no one finds out who he is. He also had another one of his pieces most recently sold at that same gallery. It's a tiny thing like that big with the stick men. £250,000. He actually went from originally being homeless and just doing this for fun, just with a few money went to now becoming a worldwide celebrated artist. Pretty remarkable, right, guys? So Stik is really famous. And again, S-T-I-I-K. Over here, guys, a really, really famous artist, one of the most celebrated pieces in the area. The reason for this is twofold. One, because it's just really cool. And two, because this guy doesn't usually do murals. He does wheat pasting. Remember the posters I spoke to you of? He's called Subdude. Subdude obviously is always around political ideas and quite a mocking style. Like this one, a short history of tractors in Ukraine from in 2021 when the Russian tanks broke down and the Ukrainian farmers dragged them off their land. Behind him, you will see a lot of him around here, and especially in Camden as well, a Colombian artist who lives down here, and he actually lives in Dalston, called Otto Schade. Osh, you'll say it there. Most influenced by the work of Salvador Dali. Most of his work is focused around environmentalism or anti-war. So if you look closely at this one, guys, if we just come on over, it's the soldier, standing tall and proud, but what's he made out of? Ribbon and thread, yeah? So what happens if I pull? The whole thing collapses. If you'd like to come over here as well, guys. Because now it's time to show you probably the most famous artist of them all, the one everyone comes to see. Banksy! Everyone wants to see a bit of Banksy. It's one of the few protected Banksy pieces in the world and here in London. There's a couple of them around here. Now, Banksy started in the late 80s, early 90s. In which place? Bristol, very good. He started in Bristol, most of his stuff around anti-police movements and anti-war. Probably his most famous one in that period was this one in the late 90s, called The Mild, Mild West, with the teddy bear throwing a Molotov cocktail at the policeman as well. Now, what makes Banksy so famous? What does everyone want to know? Who he is, right? And he keeps this secret. There's some amazing documentaries about it as well. There's a Radio 4 podcast on it as well called I think it's called The Art of Banksy. It's absolutely incredible. Really interesting to listen to. And Banksy's also famous because not only does he do giant murals, he loves to break every rule on the planet. Probably one of the most famous instances of this was in 2007 when he went into the British Museum in the middle of the day, drew on the walls, and it took a week for anyone to notice what he'd done. He did this in the middle of the British Museum. Over here, though, another one of Britain's most famous artists, a man whose work's become so popular that one of his favourite purchasers of his work is former US President Barack Hussein Obama. Again, a local boy from the East End, and his name is Ben Eine. When you put it together, Ben Eine becomes benign. He's most famous for doing his style of what we call typography, like the old typewriting keyboards. And you'll never guess what the name of this piece is here. It's a really difficult one to guess. Any ideas? Yeah, of course, the name of this piece is Scary. Now, why did he just put the word scary over a wall? Very simple, actually. He did it because it was to raise awareness for men's mental health. Why here? Because behind you here was actually a nightclub here in London. So for young guys going into clubs, you're supposed to give off this thing of bravado, of strength, of confidence. You might be putting that on, but while you're doing that, in your head, everything might be very scary. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. You'll see another one of his most famous works around here as well. Another famous artist down there, firstly the bird, Steve McCracken, but more famous is what he calls his little demons. These figures, you've probably seen them absolutely everywhere. There used to be some near where I lived, I absolutely love them, by a guy called Nathan Bowen, his little demons. They pop up frigging everywhere. Also, guys, just quickly over here, just an example of when people try and rip stuff off the walls, just to show you what I mean. So you've got this one here, which is obviously one of the Ronzo plaques. You can see it's made out of kind of cheap plaster for that reason. And again, one of Kai's ones here. So again, the point I'm trying to make, this is not for you to steal and make money off of. This is for the public. It's kind of why we make it out of cheap material. Who's on the door here, guys? Who's that? Think of the I'm sorry to swear, Arsenal French football legend. Thierry Noir. Yeah, stop swearing. Thierry Noir. So again, imagine waking up in the morning and seeing that on your door.
Makes your door worth a few quid.
Absolute fortune, which means that the guy who owns this, the landlord, the property rate goes through the roof. So he, of course, wants to keep it there as well. So guys, quickly, who's this? Think fast. David Speed, very good. If you want him to do your photo, send him an interesting photo, and if he likes it, he'll just put it up on a wall. He's really cool, David. So guys, just over here behind me, two famous artists, the smiley faces by a guy called Dotmaster. And can anyone tell me who the other artist is, the type of typography?
Scary man again.
Yeah, Ben Eine, the scary man. Now, before reading what it actually says on here, do you think this is going to be a positive message or a sad message?
You'd think positive by the colours.
Okay, you think positive because of the colours? I'll tell you what it says. I don't like this anymore. He put this up in 2020 following the COVID pandemic. The idea being that we all thought it was fun for about 5 minutes sitting in our house in our pants and t-shirts, because none of us did that, right, mate? And then we all got bored very quickly, right? Exactly. So guys, who's this again? This is David Speed. Now, David Speed has one here, because David runs one of these studios over here to do a lot of his work. So guys, over here's a really famous piece here in London. This is by Jim Vision. He did this here in 2020 for the Black Lives Matter movement as well. A lot of his stuff has this real influence of psychedelica to it. It was of like Afro-Caribbean and African-American culture, the cultural awakening and the kind of major awareness that was brought to the world, which should have been a long time coming, but was there as well. It always makes me think of Diana Ross. I think it's absolutely amazing. So Jim Vision is a really, really special guy. Now this one is by another of probably the most of Britain's or London's most celebrated street artists, originally from Australia, but spent most of his life here, a guy called Jimmy C, James Cochran. His most famous style of what we call dotting. This piece called The Lady of Whitby Street, he put here in 2019. Can you see the Thierry Noir on the shed door just over there, guys? And also one of my favorite pieces just down here, guys. This is One's Art. Remember the swans and the flowers I told you about? Put here in 2017, this is his biggest piece. But these are people's flats. Imagine waking up in the morning, walking out of your door and seeing that. I think that's pretty special, don't you? Also, guys, another really beautiful mural, just quickly while I walk past, is this one here. Renato Ribeiro. Really using all the floral into it as well. Guys, it's a really famous street artist here in London. This is Bessie Squam. She's Squams. I'm so bad at pronouncing this. Her stuff is absolutely amazing. They're always in like different, the idea of everyone's human underneath everything, which is a really beautiful one. One of my favorites around the back there with the trans flag colours. The idea it doesn't matter what you are, you're all human underneath. We should just love each other no matter what. Yes, I got that right. So yeah, but just to show you, just do some new work. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's just about like unity and stuff, isn't it? I try and convey emotions. That's like my interest. Yeah, thank you.
Listen, thank you so much. Cheers.
Oh,
thank you. So these are pretty incredible, guys, just quickly. So this one's the most famous by Zappo and Jim Vision. It's called High Five. It's actually been here 5 years this year. It's to celebrate this building. This is a rehab clinic. So they called it High Five for 5 years of the rehab clinic being in place. The other one by Ed Hicks, who we saw earlier, and this is One's Art with the flowers. So yeah. So guys, before our famous fun activity at the end, which is what everyone looks forward to. Welcome to Allen Gardens. This is known as the Street Art Museum. It's literally an open space where street artists from all over the world come. If you come on a day like this, sometimes I can sit in the park and you watch the biggest artists, so Jimmy C, Jim Vision, David Speed, doing the most insane stuff you've ever seen. And I'll show you a bit more. We might get lucky if you follow me. A new one by Hunto. Oh, sick. This wasn't here yesterday. I'm really happy. This is the thing I do, so I'm like, oh, new one. Oh, new one. So guys, I think we've seen quite a fair amount of art today. I don't know what you think. So we've seen wheat pasting, we've seen murals, we've seen David Speed, Jimmy C, Banksy, Space Invader. We've seen mushrooms. Yes, we've seen Stik as well. But now I think, as great as that is, I think it's time for you guys to have a go. So yeah, you talk about you sweating. I've been carrying all these around with me. I made sure to have at least 11 cans with me for you. Honestly, come on guys, I'll pass them all out to everyone. Yeah? Governor? Big shakes myself. White. But listen, guys, I want to say it has been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've had a wonderful time as I have today. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you.